Hi there, and welcome to Plant CEO. In today's episode, I'd like to welcome James Petrie, the co-founder and CEO of Nourish Ingredients. Hey, James, how are you?
Hey, Anand. Yeah, not too bad, thank you.
Great to have you on the show. Your lab is currently in Canberra, in New South Wales, in Australia, but you're at home at the moment. But in terms of Canberra, how far is that exactly from Sydney? Is it about 2.5 hours away?
Yeah, about that. About 2.5 hours south of Sydney in the ACT, the Capital Territory. Yeah, not too far.
Yeah, awesome. Great. So let's start by you telling me what Nourish Ingredients is as a company.
So we're a startup. We're about 24 people at the moment. And what we're doing, we're trying to build the sort of fats and oils, the lipids that make plant protein foods taste really good. Because at the moment we're using a lot of vegetable oil fat or a lot of vegetable oil, and it doesn't really have that animal-like attribute that you want to get out of an animal type product. And so we're trying to fill the gap there by making the real deal, making those animal fats, but making them in a yeast platform. So making them in fermentation. So if you think about how you might brew beer at the moment, and you've got a little yeast cell that spits out alcohol, what we do is we get that yeast cell to spit out fats and oils.
Yeah. And so at the moment, in terms of, I guess, alternative protein, what sort of fats are being used today in those products?
So it depends on the product, right? But the ones that we most commonly see on labels are a generic vegetable oil. So maybe canola or soybean oil maybe, or a safflower oil. And then you've got more specialty ones like a coconut oil or a coconut fat, which might be hard at room temperature. And then you have maybe a palm oil as well. Some of them are using things like cocoa butter, which is the chocolate fat that gives you that really nice mouth coating. But, while these have interesting properties, none of them are really animal-like in terms of the flavor, the aroma, and exactly how they perform in the food.
Yeah, great. So I think it would be great to understand and maybe have like a one-on-one on what what fats are and lipids, etc. But before we do that, let's play a little fun game. I'm going to call this
right.
Good fat, bad fat. Okay. So I'm going to tell you a number of different items and products and oils, and you need to tell me if it's good fat or bad fat. Does that sound good?
All right, let's have a crack.
Okay, first one, avocado.
Yeah, pretty good. Yep, good fat.
Okay, fish oil.
Oh yeah, very good.
Okay, palm oil.
Yeah, not quite so good. In fact, I'd call that one bad.
Okay, beef fat.
Beef fat, it all depends on how much you eat and what else you eat. Not great, not totally bad for you either.
Okay, chicken fat.
Exactly the same as beef in that sense. I mean, and all of these, there's nuance to it, right? Because all of these have some healthy attributes to them, and they've also got some unhealthy ones. Yeah.
Okay, vegetable oil.
On the whole, pretty good.
Okay, sunflower oil.
Yeah, pretty good.
Olive oil.
Yeah, good.
Okay, last one, extra virgin olive oil.
Oh, that's an interesting, yeah. So extra virgin, I think better. I think it's a good one. I think it's better than normal olive oil. You get a lot of, not because the oil itself is necessarily any different, but you get a lot of other good stuff coming out of the olive.
Okay, so I think let's unpick that now. That's a fun game.
Thank you for the opportunity to unpick. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's start with some of those. So avocado oil or avocado fat, I should say. What's your opinion on that, and why is that healthy? Is it because it doesn't include cholesterol?
That's one reason. So, like on the whole, vegetable fats have a couple of things going for them, right? And this includes avocado, sunflower, safflower, whatever else. It's the oil itself is usually pretty good in terms of the fatty acids that make that oil up. But you also have a lot of other stuff. You've got carotenoids, a lot of antioxidants that are present in that plant oil. And instead of cholesterol that you might have in an animal product, you'll then have a phytosterol, which is actually quite good for you. And so it's a complex reason, but on the whole, those sort of quality plant oils tend to be better for you.
Yeah. And then when you said that fish oil is very good for you, the fish are consuming marine plants or algae, for example, and therefore absorbing the oils from those plants themselves. So they don't naturally, I guess, produce that. But and that's why that oil is healthy, basically, is what you're also saying.
Yeah, those omega-3 fats or those omega-3 fatty acids, they're good for you. So they have, you have two types of omegas that people think about, or three with omega-9 as well. But you've got omega-3s, and these are what you find in fish oils, okay? And so specifically the long-chain omega-3s that you find in marine sources like algae and fish. And so that's EPA and DHA, right? And so then you've also got, on the other hand, you've got omega-6s. Okay, now the omega-3, they're both important for good bodily function, and you need them both to maintain hormone levels and all the rest. But on the whole, omega-3 tends to be anti-inflammatory and omega-6 tends to be pro-inflammatory. And it's the ratio of these two that's really important. Now, the reason fish oil is really good for us is that in a Western diet especially, we tend to eat a lot more omega-6. And so, you try and get that balance of intake between the two.
Right. So what sort of foods has omega-6, which is high in inflammatory?
So meat products do tend to be higher in omega-6, and some egg products, for instance, they'll have omega-6. And so it's all about how much of this stuff you eat, right? And so the goal when you're talking about engineering a new type of fat, the goal is, how much of the taste and experience can you capture while maybe also having an even healthier product than you would usually have with an animal source. Yeah, it's a really exciting area for a lipid engineer.
Yeah. So let's talk about, I guess, your engineering experience, because you really got into the subject when you also recreated omega-3 oils, right, as a vegetable source. So it'd be great to understand that background. And then I think we should go and just delve a bit more into lipids and fats and, trans fats.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll give you the background because it's a fascinating story. Actually, when I went through university, the one part of biochemistry that I just didn't click with, that I couldn't stand, was actually lipid metabolism and lipid biochemistry. And so it's pretty typical that I'd then end up in this space for the rest of my career. But look, so what happened, I got sent to go and visit Canberra, the CSIRO labs in Canberra, and they said, go and have a chat with the researchers there. And I met Surinder Singh, who's one of the eminent plant biotechnologists in this area, and he was just kicking off, along with others at the CSIRO here in Australia, kicking off a bunch of work on omega-3 engineering. And so I joined that project, and it took about 10 years, but we did it. Like with a company here in Australia, we built a canola fish oil replacement. So we took genes from algae, and which are the primary producers in the ocean. We took genes from those algae and we put them into canola. And so broadly analogous to what we're trying to do again here, but with other types of animal fats, is create a sustainable new source of these things and try and do it. Actually, over in the UK, you guys have got a similar project at Rothamsted Research. They've done similar work with camelina. It's fascinating area for lipid engineers. But when we got to that point of actually having produced this fish oil type oil in canola, it really unlocks, your thinking around what is possible in this specialized lipid field. How far can we go and create better experiences for the consumer, certainly more sustainable ones, and hopefully even healthier ones.
Yeah. So let's talk about I guess, a one-on-one on fats and lipids. Can you explain a bit more about, their function? You spoke about the taste profile and why that's important, and it'd be good to talk about cholesterol as well.
Okay. So lipid is a catch-all term, right? So there's loads of different types of lipids, and generally what it means is that it's not soluble in water. It's like soluble in a non-polar solvent. And so what that means technically is When you drop non-technically, when you drop a bit of oil on water, it'll float. Okay, and so that's the sort of class of molecules, but it's very broad. So you've got fats and oils, and we'll talk about them in a sec. And then you've got things like the cholesterol family, and then you've got other sterols, and then there's a whole range of types of things. The ones that we're really interested in are the fatty acid based ones. So if you think of a fatty acid molecule, the way we usually consume these things is you'll have a glycerol backbone which has 3 positions on it, 1, 2, and 3, and a triglyceride has 3 fatty acids on that backbone. Okay, hence the tri. And what those different fatty acids are is really diverse. So it can be a whole bunch of different types of fatty acids. But when you put different ones together, it can give you a really different consumer experience in terms of how you perceive it in your mouth and on your taste buds.
Yeah. Is that bad for you? Like if you overconsume it?
So it's a really rich energy source, which is where a lot of the problems come from. So if you eat too much fat, then you're going to get fat, right? Because it's basically how we store fat in our bodies as well. It's as a triglyceride.
Yeah.
So you want to, it's all about moderation, but there are some more nuances to it, right? Because the types of fatty acids that are present on there can have effects on your cholesterol as well. Okay, so there are 2 types of cholesterol. There's the good cholesterol and the bad cholesterol, right? And so if you have the wrong sorts of fatty acids on that triglyceride molecule, that can lead to accumulation of that bad cholesterol. Yeah. Whereas if you have good ones, it can lower it.
The bad one is the LDL and the good one is the HDL cholesterol. Let's think about meat and chicken. They have high levels of also bad cholesterol, which will basically start to build up and clog up arteries, right? So what other things have, we spoke about that in that game earlier. Some of the other bad ones could be the omega-6.
What we're trying to do with our, so if you have too much of a natural animal fat, then the sort of fatty acids that are present, as well as the fact that food actually contains, that meat food actually does contain cholesterol itself, this can lead to getting more of that bad type cholesterol. So the angle we're taking is, first of all, our yeast doesn't have any cholesterol in it for a start. Okay, and then the second thing is if you carefully choose what those different fatty acids are, you can get a healthier outcome. So you can promote the good type of cholesterol, you can promote the HDL, and lower the bad one by being careful about how you assemble that triglyceride. And so we're trying to, it sounds a bit cheeky, we're trying to have the best of both worlds in the sense that we want to recreate the experience, but we try and do it in a healthy way as well.
Yeah. So that's pretty awesome, because I guess the point is when you start potentially adding your ingredients to these existing products that are trying to recreate the alt protein, you could actually get healthier than the ones that are available in the market today.
I mean, that's the goal. And it's a big topic, right? Because it's not only about the fat or the oil that is present in these foods, it's also about the whole ecosystem that surrounds it, right? So in our view, we want more people eating plant protein foods, okay? And one of the barriers to mass adoption is that it doesn't taste the same and it doesn't have that same experience when you bite into it. Yeah, and that's what we want to try and change is, can you really make this food shine and sing? And part of the solution there is the fat.
Yeah. Why is it so much that you're getting the flavors, the taste profile from fat?
It's a good question. It's a complex answer. There are a lot of cooking reactions that happen. So when you brown up a bit of meat, for instance, and you start to smell that roasting smell, a lot of what you're perceiving actually comes from the type of lipids that are present in that bit of meat. And so that's something that's really hard to recreate with a plant fat. You don't get those same signature molecules being generated. And that's one angle that we're going after.
So at the moment, you're busy in the labs experimenting with trying to recreate different types of animal meats. Is that correct? And which ones are you focused on, and which will be first out to market for you?
Yeah, we are creating a bunch of different animal fats at the moment. And so the ones that we're looking at broadly, we're looking at dairy fats, we're looking at meat fats, and different ones are at different levels of progress in terms of where we're up to. We're still a seed stage company, as they say, and so we're still relatively early in that process. But some of them are reasonably impressive now already in terms of how we're perceiving them and how our partners are perceiving how they're performing. So we're pretty confident we're on the right track, but I don't want to mislead you in the sense we've still got more work to do to get them out there.
Yeah. So thinking about dairy then, what are the first sort of use cases that you would see within the dairy industry?
I think dairy is a fascinating one because, we talked earlier about that triglyceride molecule with, 3 different fatty acids. Dairy is particularly unusual. Like, one of the fatty acids that's present on that triglyceride molecule is what they call a short chain fatty acid. So it doesn't have very many carbons in it. And that's something that's really unusual. It's not widely present in the plant kingdom. And so recreating that dairy signature, when you bite into a full fat versus a low fat ice cream, say, the difference immediately. Like, recreating that is pretty tough without using an actual milk fat. And so that's one of the applications that we see is foods where you really want to hit that dairy signature moment when you bite into it and you get that, oh yeah, I know what I'm eating now. That's the sort of food that we're targeting.
Right, awesome. And it's nothing to do with casein.
So that's a protein, right? And that's those people.
Yeah, but that also, does that add to? There's a lot of people who are focused on casein, right? Trying to replicate that, especially within alternative milk. Yeah,
very important.
Yep. Yeah. So explain the difference between, because are you getting any taste or sort of more like, texture profile within that protein or not?
You do get. So it's a complex thing, right? Milk is quite a complex liquid, and meat is very complex as well. So part of the solution is the proteins, part of the solution is the fats and oils, and then part of the solution is the other stuff, the antioxidants, the carotenoids, all of the other elements that you have in that food. So when you put them all together, it needs to resemble the real thing, okay? And I think people have been very diligently working on the protein end, both in terms of casein and other whey type proteins. But then we've come at it from the fat perspective and said, this is the little part that we want to try and nail.
Got it. So who do you think is, I guess, doing some really great work already in the protein and the casein area?
I love Perfect Day. I reckon they're doing an awesome job in terms of their dairy protein work. We do have some in Australia as well. We've got a little startup company called Eden Brew, who is doing very similar or doing somewhat similar work around milk protein production. And there are different element or different ways to tackle that problem. And there are a bunch of companies that are really active in the protein space. It's so exciting. Like, when you look at this transformation that's happening around food and how we build it and how we eat it as consumers, there's this shift taking place to, everyone's starting to think, how do we make this more sustainable? How do we make it more intelligently? And this is being now added as another bucket from which we can take our food. Tremendously exciting.
Yeah. And I think it's quite cool that you've created yourself as an ingredient company. That means that you could allow yourself to work with these other companies and form partnerships. And then potentially one day there'll be like some, acquisitions that happen that will create some, Uber company that has it all, right? Has cracked the protein, has cracked the fats, and they all come together and you can all work together to reproduce to a really high degree the same product that you're used to, but without the bad stuff in it.
It might end up there. I don't know how it'll end up in terms of who buys who, but if you don't get bogged down in that sort of exit thinking, the future that you just described as a whole is exactly where it is. At the moment, the alternative protein food space is still maturing, right? So if you look at a traditional food industry, you've got this mature supply chain where you have a whole bunch of people along that supply chain, and each of them nails that particular part of it. And today, we have a different scenario in the plant protein and alternative protein space, where you have companies trying to do the whole lot. We feel that that is going to mature more into the direction of a traditional sector, okay? Because the expertise and the understanding that can build good fat is not necessarily the same as the expertise and understanding that builds a good protein. But when you put them together, oh wow, yeah, you can really change it up.
Yeah. Interesting. It's a bit like Heart to Heart. Do you remember that show years ago where you have when you put them together, they create amazing.
This is my boss, Jonathan Hart, a self-made millionaire. He's quite a guy. This is Mrs. H. She's gorgeous. She's one lady who knows how to take care of herself. By the way, my name is Max. I take care of both of them, which ain't easy. Because when they met, it was murder.
I won't say I was an avid watcher, but I get what you're saying.
There's probably people listening to the show who's like, what are they on about? That show was from years ago. Thinking about, I guess, competitors now, or you might see them as friendly partners that also do this. Is there other people in other markets, maybe in Israel or Singapore, that are tackling the fat side of this as well, like similar to what you were doing?
There are, and I think some of the competitors that my mind goes to automatically are those in the cellular agriculture space. Okay, and so what this means is you have people sourcing protein from plants. You have people like Perfect Day sourcing protein from yeast or cells that they grow up. And then you have people who are taking the animal cell and growing that up directly, right? And so that's where cellular agriculture comes in. And there are some companies who are doing that with fat cells from animals. And so they're creating fat from the animal itself. Now, that sounds on the face of it really attractive. And it's like, yeah, let's just do that. But it's a little bit more involved than that, because for a couple of reasons. One of them is cost, right? It is expensive to grow these types of cells. And I think we've still got a ways to go before it's going to be economical. But the second reason is we're not pairing up that fat with the same protein and the same rest of the food that fat comes from in the first place. Okay, so now we're trying to pair up, say, a cow fat that they might grow up with a plant protein. Okay, and that's very different to a beef protein. And so in our view, you actually are better off trying to understand what are the elements of the fat that really makes it unique and really makes it sing to you in terms of your taste buds. And can we nail that and just leave the rest of it behind? Because it might be bad for you. We don't want it. It's not adding much. And can we just bring through the parts which are really nailing that consumer experience? And if we can accomplish that, then that's how the whole plant industry space explodes.
Right. So if these companies who are going down the cell-based route, are they able to take out the bad stuff when they're growing those cells? Or is that too far in the future? Because it seems to me that you're able to do that. Yours doesn't have cholesterol, for example.
It's a good question. To be honest, I don't know the answer. I don't know how far they're willing to push that. Technically, absolutely you could. Whether people are ready to eat a modified animal cell line product, I don't know about that.
Yeah, it's also, it's very much an ethical question whether you choose to have it in the first place, right? I guess, as well.
I think it brings up an important point. Like there's different, we view ourselves as effectively a technology agnostic company in the sense that we use a whole bunch of stuff across the spectrum of tools available to reach the goal. And we do that because we understand that some customers want to nail the taste, other customers want to nail the health and sustainability, and some of them don't want a GMO at all. And so you've really got to understand that mix and try and cater to all of them. And so we have solutions that span that sort of space.
Okay. So some lipids contain vitamins such as A, D, E, and K. Is that something that you're looking to add to your products? Maybe not immediately, but maybe in the future?
That's a good question. I hadn't been, but I'm going to jot it down and we might send you a check one day or something.
Okay, yeah. Be more than happy.
but I think it underlines the point, right? So we, in highly processed foods, we've tended to really simplify what it is that we're eating, in a sense where you take an unprocessed food and a natural food. It's got a whole bunch of stuff in it, whether it be these lipid soluble vitamins or it be other stuff that might be good for you. And I think we've got the opportunity to, as we go down this path of building these new foods of the future, we've got the chance to reverse that trend a bit.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. So tell me about your funding to date. And, so you have raised a good round for your seed. Tell me about your investors and how you got to that stage that you're in now.
Yeah, okay. So we've raised 11 million US. We are still a seed round company. So we're still pretty early stage, but we are going to go out the door again before too long. I think that, the magnitude of that sort of seed round, it's a big seed round. It's not, it's not the biggest, but it is big. And I think that's a reflection of the heat that's in this plant protein space or this alternative protein space at the moment. And it's because everyone can see the potential of the space and really wants to bolster it up as much as possible to make it shine. Now, I think one of our investors is Horizons Ventures, and they have a long history out of Hong Kong. They have a long history of investing in these plant protein type companies and alternative protein type companies.
Including, I think, was it Impossible that they invested in ages ago? Yeah.
And Perfect Day.
And Perfect
Day.
So
they're right in this space. The other one, Main Sequence Ventures, they are based here in Australia and they've been very supportive so far. And so we're really excited to have both of them. And I think they complement each other pretty well.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what's the plan with the initial raise? Are you looking at new equipment, labs? What is it that you're going to be focusing on with that investment that you've got?
Look, I think like most startup companies, we began using external R&D teams. We still have very good links with the CSIRO here in Australia, our national research agency, and also other universities, Flinders, QUT, and others scattered around here. We reached a point that I think, again, a lot of startups reach where we needed to internalize some of that because you need more control over day-to-day processes in order to move faster. And so we've just finished fitting out a new laboratory space for us here in Canberra, Australia, and that was a process. It takes a lot of time and effort, but it is worth it because it lets you now really finely control and be responsive to the sort of R&D we need to do. And really, it's more than that because then you can also tie it to the rest of your business directly. So when you have your internal R&D team sitting with your internal marketing people and your business people and your commercial director and IP, they all sort of feed off each other. And, when you get that cross-pollination, tremendously powerful.
Yeah.
But, having said that, the externals are still really important part of what we're doing.
Yeah, sure. So will that be enough? It's not really, at the moment, it's kind of like the early stage R&D to get the product to, refine it before you look at maybe another facility where you have even bigger tanks, for example, where you can start to scale up. Is that something, or would it be like, well, we've created the research, now we'll go to an external company who can actually, traditional fermenting, brewery, for example, that can then scale that product up. Is that what you think? Or do you think you'll start to then need the cash to buy your own scaling facility?
I think it'll be a bit of both. I think it's really product dependent. Okay. So for some of the products that we're building, they're relatively low, they're still higher than a competing vegetable oil or even animal fat, but the cost of goods is such that you need to reach an economy of scale that allows it to work. Otherwise, you'll bleed to death on your cogs, as one of our partners said to us. And so that's part of our thinking. But the other part is, well, we have some products which are at different volume requirements and different value. And you can afford to think a little differently about how you produce them. I think it'll be a mixture. I think one thing that's interesting is there's we're seeing a diminishing amount of fermentation capacity globally, because this is really being, people are understanding that this fermentation area has so much potential. Yeah.
I just wanted to go back to your early days when you helped to recreate omega-3 oil using plant extracts. Just to go back on the differences between 3, 6 and 9. And I think in general, like you said, that omega oil is very good for you, but also to balance hormones and also for even good for mental health, for example. Can you just talk a little bit about that and where you see that going? Now, there's so many plant sources, and as we go more into a plant-based diet, vegan diet, that will start to increase. And I know there's many companies who are creating their own product lines on that now.
Look, it's an interesting question because there are not very many plant sources. Okay, so this is a really common misconception. People see something like flaxseed oil or chia, right? And they see omega-3. That is not the same omega-3 that you'll find in fish oil or in an algae that grows in the ocean. So they're called long-chain omega-3s, and they're the ones that have really strong anti-inflammatory effects, good mental health effects, cardiovascular effects. Okay, so these are, it's important to source the right type of omega-3 if you want that impact. And so that's something that we see that, that's one of the reasons we did that whole canola engineering project, is because, well, how are you going to feed the global population enough fish oil? If you take them out of the ocean, you're not going to have many fish left, right? And so you want to try and create an alternative source that's more sustainable. And I think back in the day, we did a back of the envelope calculation. Actually, I remember we were driving to a meeting, and one of our colleagues was in the back seat, literally with the back of an envelope. We figured out that 1 hectare of this crop will create as much of that DHA molecule, or a couple of acres of this crop will create as much of that DHA molecule as 10,000 kilos of wild caught fish.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's like that's a staggering figure, and we had to double check it. But it's a staggering figure because the sustainability implications of this sort of technology are immediately made crystal clear. Yeah. You can make this same type of animal fat, but you don't have to take it out of the animal, and that's really appealing.
Totally. So as a consumer, what should consumers be looking for when they're looking at omega oils, for example? What do they need to know so it's sourced in the way that they get these long chain benefits?
So have a look on the back of if you go, next time you go to your supermarket, in Australia, that'd be Woolies, in the UK, I guess it's Tesco's. Yeah. Pick up a tuna can and look on the back, and in the nutritional breakdown, it'll have a couple of fatty acids listed, EPA and DHA. Okay, those are 2 acronyms, but I'm not going to read out the whole name for you. But EPA and DHA, they're 2 long-chain omega-3 oils. Okay, and so if you look at other products, say an infant formula, a lot of them will have those same ones. They don't take it from fish. They'll usually take it from a marine algae, which is the primary producer for the infant formula. So they're the ones that you really want. And the same with supplements. Go and compare the back of, say, a flax oil jar with a fish oil jar, and you'll see now that you have these 2 different types of omega-3. You want the long chain marine type.
Got it. And there are companies who are really investing on the algae side, and there's so many different use cases. Like I interviewed this company called Back of the Yard Algae Sciences, and there were, again, having these tanks that will create algae, but the use cases were as colorants, natural colorants, for example, but also for protein, oils as well. So I know there's developments happening in that space, and that's quite exciting too.
I think it's great. I love this sort of alternative way to create these product. I mean, the one that you're probably talking about is called astaxanthin and other carotenoid molecules. And when you take a fillet of salmon, how you have that really nice pink red sort of color, that's usually derived from an algae that grows in the ocean, very similar to the omega-3 oil accumulation. Like it eats these smaller fish which have eaten the algae, and then it sort of bioaccumulates. And that astaxanthin molecule is really quite valuable as a colorant, but also as a healthy antioxidant. So yeah, you can get a lot of good stuff from algae. I think one of the limitations is the cost of growth, which is still a bit a tough hurdle to get over, but people are making headway.
Yeah, it's interesting that, because I remember in Seaspiracy, they were talking about, they were adding that sort of red color to fish to give it that salmon color, even though it might not have been actually salmon. I don't know if you remember that scene in that, because I guess those fish aren't getting that plant,
the natural algae.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting, and it goes to show how we associate certain attributes of the foods that we eat with the real thing and with health, and it can be unconscious as well. Like that, I talked about the dairy example earlier. It's the same with meat. When you bite into it, if it's got that real type of fat, your body knows, and your nostrils know, and the volatiles hit the right parts of your anatomy, and you just go bingo. That's the business.
Yeah. So let's talk about just trans fats and hydrogenated fats, right? Can you just explain about that and how your product will be in relation?
Okay, so the short version is we don't have any of that stuff, right? Yeah. So we don't go down that trans fat path. You should avoid trans fats. They're really not good for you. And so the way that came about is that you take a normal vegetable oil that we talked about earlier, and it's liquid, right? So the difference between a fat and an oil is just that one's liquid at room temperature, the other's solid. Okay, right. But chemically speaking, they're very similar. They're both triglycerides. If you want to make a liquid fat solid, or an oil hard, you do a process called hydrogenation, which strips out all the double bonds that are in those fatty acid molecules, makes them all saturated. Okay, now if that process is not complete, if that hydrogenation process to strip out all of those double bonds is not complete, you can sometimes be left with a different type of double bond called trans double bond, or a trans fat. Yeah. And this is the one that will get into your eyes and mess you up in your arteries. Yep.
What do you mean get into your eyes?
Oh, so macular degeneration can be caused by trans fats. And so in part, I want to make it clear to your audience, I'm not a medical doctor. This is just stuff that I've read in articles, but it's not really healthy for you. So do avoid trans fats is my understanding of the current advice. Right. And one way to get around that is just to get the yeast, in our case, to naturally make oil or fat that is hard. Okay, so you can change the types of fatty acids that are present on that triglyceride molecule. And if you get the mixture right, you get a hard fat instead of a soft oil. And that's the way we're getting around that.
That's the question I want to lead to. So you will be creating hard fats, basically. If it moves from hard to liquid, does that change the profile then and the health benefits potentially?
No, it doesn't. So the reason hard fats or saturated fats are often perceived to be bad for you is because of the types of fatty acids that are present. Okay, so one of them in particular, you could point to and say palmitic acid. Okay, so this is the one that's commonly found in palm oil, hence the name. And it is 16 carbons with no double bonds, okay, saturated fat. Now, that one can, not so much in dairy fats, but in some other type of animal fat, say, that palmitic acid can lead to that bad cholesterol accumulating in your body. There are other types of saturated fats, for instance, one with 18 carbons or stearic acid, which don't have that negative health effect and still give rise to a very hard fat. So that's an example of how you can achieve the same end result, but you can do it in a way that's possibly healthier for the consumer.
Yeah. So, the amount of carbons would mean that it's stronger and therefore more solid.
It has a different melting temperature effect.
Okay.
Yep.
So what next for you, like in terms of the next, half of this year? You probably look to raise again towards the end of this year, or even look at your Series A next year. Is that what the plan is for you?
Yeah, we're always looking about our next raise, trying to figure out the right timing. It's from a science background, this is all a dark art in a sense. What we're concentrating on at the moment is we've started to build our intellectual property up in these different areas that we've been talking about. We're broadening that as time goes on, but we're beginning to turn our attention to products that people can actually start to test and use. And so, as you said earlier, this is something that we do have the luxury of working directly with food experts from other companies on. And we're beginning that process now where we can start to get people to play around with this stuff and iterate, because I'm sure that what we built in our version 1 is not perfect. And I don't think that our partners will hesitate to tell us that. And so, but then the advantage of working in a platform like a yeast, a fermentation platform, is that it's really fast to iterate and that we can make changes on the hop.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So really wish you the best of luck, and thanks for the great insights, and really cool what you're doing. Making fat sexy, if you like.
Look, that's the goal. And I think that's part of the problem, right? It's not a sexy topic, fat, but it is so important to how good food tastes. And that's the part that we want to really nail. And it's tremendously exciting for us. But look, thank you for having us on the show. I really appreciate it. So
you're welcome.
Very good.
Hope to see you again soon.
Good on you. Have a good day.
Yeah, take care. Bye-bye.